icon on the actual GoToWebinar. Perfect. I start seeing people clicking. That's awesome. Okay, so the other thing too is if you have questions regarding the lathe package specifically, because this webinar we are only going to cover the lathe system. In 2 weeks we will be doing another version 29 overview of what's new, mainly covering the milling features. In exactly 2 weeks you guys will be receiving emails shortly for that one as well. If you do want to sign up, please go ahead and click on that and sign up for that. So today we're going to go over the PowerPoint first, kind of show you guys some of the stuff that's going to be new. We did change a lot of different things to make your guys' lives easier when it comes to lathe programming, and even added in some features that haven't been in our system before. So first thing, just kind of covering this webinar, we're just really going to cover, like I said, the lathe stuff that can make it easier for you guys and what has really changed. Okay, we're going to go over the new lathe feature types, operation enhancements, new lathe tool and holder definitions, and then a lot of other options for those. So when we rewrote the actual specific lathe system, we gave standard holder definitions now where you can actually see the imagery, full feature definitions where you guys can really go into customizing. Remove needs to create extra geometry. In the older versions of BobCAD, you did have to create extra geometry for the toolpath to cut certain areas or not cut certain areas. We eliminated you guys having to do that. So we're going to go over that as well. Okay, we eliminated a lot of extra drawing options. We added constraint options, and what a constraint option actually is it's the ability to just tell it, where do you want the toolpath to go to. You are able to do that. So first we'll cover some of the constraint options in particular. So the restraint options in particular are cut from the original stock, which allows you guys to not have to draw lines. It can actually cut from the original stock. You have utilized the geometry, okay? And then you also have customized. So you guys can actually define customized specific heights that the toolpath would go up to. So instead of having to draw a line from here up to where you need it to go to, you are just able to say, hey, I'm going to define a specific value. When you define that specific value, that is where the toolpath starts from, and then it will continue your cut down. All right, we also added in the ability to do extensions. What that allows you guys to actually do is, normally here's your part. You can actually add extensions to the piece so it continues further on the first part or continues on past the back part. So you guys can actually add extensions to the toolpath. You guys also have the ability to go ahead and automatically remove undercut areas from selected geometry, useful from eliminating grooves and areas that require different tools. Remove primary undercut is the ability right here. Instead of you guys having to draw a line directly across here to stop it from going in there, when you turn on a specific switch, it'll actually just go ahead and cut straight across. You don't have to worry about anything. It's based off all geometry selection. Secondary undercut would be anything that's vertical here. It'll remove here. So what it's going to do is the last point here is going to draw an imaginary line straight down. And then obviously this is what it looks like when you remove both. All right, we added in an in-face feature. So we actually broke down the toolpaths. Instead of it just being like a turning toolpath and then you guys having the option to choose face turning or turning, they're actually in their own categories now with their own options. Grooving, we added in a new grooving style cycles with different options for it. It is its own separate cycle. All right, we went in and added obviously its own roughing, finishing, the grooving and everything, and the pattern repeats are all now categorized with their proper options. The roughing, patterning, we added new patterning and sorting. You had standard turning. You have now offset that actually follows the exact contour of the geometry selected. Standard zigzag, and then there's also an offset zigzag. So it uses the offset and then zigzag cuts back and forth. All right. We also added in the ability to have an overlap control. What that allows you guys to do is normally in a normal lathe feature, it would come, wrap it back out, go to the next cut. Now you can say overlap to previous cut or a specific distance, and what it'll do is it'll actually go ahead, when it cuts into here, it continues up to the previous cut to leave a nice smooth transition. Pattern repeat is obviously the ability to just have a specific shape of the geometry and just repeat the pattern however many pieces you'd like. You have your basic finishing operation, okay, where you guys can actually go ahead and turn diameter only, face vertical wall only, both, continuous on your facing. You guys have that ability to actually control exactly what the finishing pass is particularly cutting. Basic finish alternative. Rounded or round versus sharp corners, you have the ability now to round a corner or do a sharp corner. Okay, so depending on how you guys want it, the toolpath to output, you do have that option. Sharp creates easy to edit smaller G-code programs due to the lack of additional arc. So when you do a rounded, it does give you additional code that is hard to edit if you guys do any hand editing. It just makes it difficult. It's not impossible. It is just a little bit more of code to deal with. Groove roughing, we actually added in the ability now for standard grooving to cut across. Center out. Center alternative, we'll do one here, one back, one here, one back, and then skip. We'll skip every other pass and then come back and do them after it goes one direction. Groove roughing, multiple depths, the ability to obviously groove down at multiple depths going back and forth with pecking. Then you guys have grooving with a single pass where it does just a single pass down the center at the beginning or the end. So you guys can do, if the insert is the size of the groove and it is the shape of the groove you're looking for, you can just do a single pass where it just plunges down. Groove roughing zigzag actually does a zigzag pass back and forth for the grooving, so you guys can groove at a zigzag pattern. All right, you guys have a groove roughing allowance. Groove finishing now, face down cutting and standard. Some people draw on BobCAD and they draw a 2D sketch, or they get a 2D sketch from their previous or their customer or the people providing the part file, right? So there is an option, and we should probably cover that first so that way you guys can see it. It is the ability to bring in the solid, and what's nice is when you actually bring in the solid, okay, you guys are actually able to go ahead and use what we call a spun profile. So what that means is if you go in and you open up your solid model, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in a SolidWorks PRT file of just a lathe part, right? I used to have to do this option called intersection of curves where I had to draw a plane and I had to create it. That takes too long. What you're able to do now is under the actual utility option, there is a spun profile option, okay? What you guys are able to do with spun profile is you tell it which axes. Obviously, we want to go down the center right now. You just hit OK, right? Once you hit the OK option after you select your model, you guys will actually go ahead. If I delete out the solid right now, so I'm going to exit out of that, click on the solid and delete it, boom. There's your actual profile of your lathe part. All right. All right, and we have a question already. Did you add more tooltip orientations? Yes. We are going to go ahead and cover that when we get to the tooling section, guys. So bear with me while we get there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start off with some of the new stuff. So the setup is still the same. If any of you guys are using version 27, 28, we added in the job option where you guys go in and you pick your job. That's going to be the same for you guys. Anyone new staying at this is how we do it. We go into a machining job. You pick your turning feature. Your machine option is going to be here. Now, obviously, if you have 5 or 6 different machines, all right. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to choose turning. We're going to choose our machine. We're going to hit stock wizard, and if you have a solid model, you can pick it, but what we're going to do is just define cylindrical. You have your revolve stock option as well. And then once you hit next from there, it's going to ask you to define the stock definition. Now, what's nice is if I just go ahead and I say 3-inch stock diameter, I want it 8 inches long, for example, I can go ahead and hit next from there. I can define my clearances for my face, my diameter, and my internal diameter. And then once I hit OK from there, I'm ready to go ahead and load in my CAM tree. So now my CAM tree is set up with a turning option. You have your machine, your post-processor. What we're going to go into now is the tooling options, okay? So when you actually go into your turning tools and you go down to your tools, what will actually happen is you have all your tool categories. You pick your tool, you can go ahead and add any new tool or modifiers. Now you actually have the option here. You can assign custom shapes still, where you guys can actually draw your custom shape. You guys also have the ability to set the clearance, the tolerance setting, and the type, okay? You have your edit tool holder here. If you choose that option, this is new, where you guys can pick different predefined tool holders, okay, to hold your tools. And you guys are able to also bring in custom shape ones as well. So you guys are able to fully set up everything that you got your tool definition and holder, okay? Now, what's nice, and you have the corner reference where it's tip, center, or corner for the actual tip. If you look right here, it's probably pretty hard for you guys to see, but there is a little blue dot that indicates the tip. You have corner of the, and then you have center, okay? And that's where it calculates the tool path from, okay? Now, after you have all that set up, you guys can hit OK, and then what will happen is I always will blank out the stock. So I'll just right-click on the stock feature, hit blank. And when I right-click on Machine Setup, now you have Lathe In Face, which is your front face, Turning, Groove. See, everything is now broken down into different categories. So, for example, let's just start with a lathe turning feature on this particular case. You guys have the ability to go ahead and define what type of stock geometry. So you guys can pick the whole path. Now, if you're familiar with any of the older BobCAD lathes, selecting all of this would cause it to cut. And I'm going to show you it doing that, and then I'm going to show you how the new constraint options and everything actually help with that. So if I go ahead and I hit next, it asks me on the new feature page. As you can tell, this is quite different than anything else, but what's nice about it is you no longer have to worry about tool orientations when you guys go into the feature type. Now we have a feature definition type where either it's OD, ID, front face, or back face, depending on what you're doing, if it's a facing or anything like that. You guys can set all that stuff up here. You also have region controls, so if you do select OD, you can go ahead and choose the back face as well. This is where you choose the primary undercut. We're going to go over that as well. And then what we're going to do here is this is the constraint options where you guys are able to tell it from the top, from stock or from feature, okay? And then what's nice is you also have the extension option here where you guys are able to go in and define your extensions, okay? Once you hit next, what will happen is it asks you, do you want to do rough and finish? You guys are able to fully customize the toolpath specifically the way you guys prefer to machine and how you guys want to actually program up your lathe part. Once I actually pick the roughing feature and I go ahead and I hit the next option, I then have the ability to go ahead myself now that everything is defined, and I can hit separate moves or can cycles depending on how you want your lathe cycle to output. And once I have that pretty much defined, I am able to go ahead and hit next. You'll have the insert, okay? So what's nice is you can customize it. You have a vertical, horizontal option, okay? Now you can't really see that it's changing, but if you do go up here and you turn on your actual show tool holder and then you switch to a horizontal, it shows the tool flipping with the actual holder and everything like that, so you guys can actually have that stuff customized and set up the way you want to. You guys can obviously fully edit the tools in here as well, and at any time you guys are able to go ahead and use a custom angle if you'd like for the tool holder. Okay, so now if we go ahead, we can set up everything in here. We're going to hit next, and this is where you're going to get into your pattern options. This is where you're going to find like a standard pattern, standard cut. You have a zigzag option for each one, okay? You have your system compensation with collision detection. Now, there's an interesting change that we've changed from the previous version. When you turn on with collision detection, you have the option to use it where it just does the insert, or you have to check use tool holder. In previous versions, it automatically would go off a tool holder if it was attached. Now, the other nice option here is the offset feature that does do the offset. So we'll do a couple different versions of it so you guys can kind of see the output on it. So we'll start with standard, and we'll do the standard option. You guys will go ahead and hit next. You have your parameters where you guys choose your depth of cut. You guys have your rough allowance if you're leaving material for like a semi-finish and then a finish. Here's the no overlap, the previous cut or custom distance for overlapping your tool. Just so you guys can see, this is what it does. Obviously, when this cut comes in, it's going to go back up to the previous cut and then come off, and then it does that going back and forth. So it'll always go to your previous cut if you turn it on. So let's do it with no overlap. We want round. We're going to go down to our rapids. You actually have your rapid options here. We added in a few extra rapid options for OD clearance, ID clearance, phase clearance. Okay. The nice part about it is when you guys actually go down in here to the leads, you no longer have to the specific coordinates to try to get, you know, a perpendicular lead in or a horizontal lead in or a vertical lead in or an angle lead in, you guys can just type in the length and it'll go off of 45, or you can do custom where you guys can still key in the specific coordinate point that you'd like the lead in to start from. But the nice part is you can just turn on a switch, give it a distance, and when you guys hit compute, it'll output your toolpath. So if we look here, we have all the compensation for the holder because it's turned on right now, right? We're actually cutting down in here. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I can actually do this as probably a grooving cycle just so you guys can see. If I do that option where it just cuts it off, what it's going to do is it's going to draw a straight line from here. And it's actually just going to move straight across. And I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. So this is your standard cutting now. As you guys can see, it rapids off, comes back to does the next cut. If I go back into the feature and I edit it, I'm actually able to go down here and I can say, okay, let's do it. Let's remove primary undercut. Okay, by just the flick of one switch, this is what happens. Boom. It goes straight from the first part where it starts to go down, and it just cuts straight across. So now you would do this as a separate feature. Okay, so you guys can set it where you guys can use the settings in the software now without having to draw extra pieces of geometry. Now the other nice side is that's just a regular toolpath. So if we go in and say, okay, perfect, let's go down to our actual patterns. Let's choose the offset style. Hit compute. This is what offset looks like. Okay, so if you look, it follows the piece of cut of geometry going back. Okay, following the actual contour of the shape. Then we'll go back in and turn on zigzag so you guys can see that. And these zigzag options and feature offset options are actually available for a lot of the toolpaths. So if I go in, I choose standard, but I choose zigzag, it'll do a zigzag pass back and forth cutting it out. So it goes down, comes back, and so on and so forth. Now, if you attended the previous webinar on milling, you found out that we now have a tool backplots option in the actual system. When you actually create a feature, and it's for individual features in the tree, one at a time, when you right-click on the feature, you guys can turn on backplot. What it does bring in your tool. And you guys are able to go ahead and hit play, and you guys can actually watch the tool travel along your toolpath and see how it's actually cutting. All right, and you guys can speed up the progression, slow it down, make the tool transparent. The nice part is you're able to actually watch it do that. Now, once you're done with that, we can continue on and add some more toolpaths to the mix. We can right-click on machine setting. We can go down to our grooving option now. And let's go over some of the new grooving features. So what we're going to do is we're just going to groove this section here that isn't being cut. All right, this might be a really big groove. The idea is just to show you guys. So what's actually pretty neat, and you're going to notice this, we have the ability for you guys to choose the type of groove by the OD feature, the ID. But there's a new option called rotate. What it allows you guys to do is it allows you guys to actually do angled grooving. So if you do have a groove at a 45 on like a front face or something like that, you guys can turn on the angle, key in the angle, and select the geometry, and it'll calculate the toolpath properly for you based on it. So let's do from stock first so you guys can see what I'm talking about when we turn on this constraint option to really see it in action. When we choose the from stock option, it's going to start from the very top of the stock. So just so you guys can actually see that, we'll choose groove roughing, that's fine, and we'll define our grooving tool. And again, you can turn on the holder for it, actually see your grooving holder. Next page, you're going to have standard grooving, single pass, and you have the option when you do for beginning, center, and end. And then you guys are going to have zigzag as well, where you guys can zigzag groove down in the pocket. Now, when you're just doing standard, you're actually going to have the ability to define center out, which will go from 1, 2, 3, and then go 4, 5, 6, so on for however many toolpath pieces they need to use. And then you have alternative does 1, 2, and then it kind of hops back and forth. And then skip will skip every other pass. So 1, then it goes to 2, then it goes to 3, and then it comes back and does 4, and then goes to 5. So it's a nice options to have. You may not use them, but they're there in case you do want to use them. So if I just choose standard, for example, go down to the parameters. I do define them all. You have your multiple depth options. You have your pecking options, your roughing, your finishing allowance, semi-finish, all those options here. The nice part, too, is when you go into rapid, same thing, and the leads are going to be the same where you guys can choose your different options. But if I hit compute and let it calculate, there it is. But see how the grooving cycle's cutting up here? The problem with that, we already removed all that material, so there's no need to go here. Well, what happens now is with the constraint option, all you do is flip a switch. You say from feature height. It goes from the highest points of the geometry selection. So if I hit compute, look at that. So it goes from the highest point that we selected, boom, and grooves from there. All right. Now, the nice part too about the system is sometimes you run into that scenario where sometimes when you were trying to cut inside, do an inner diameter cut, it was somewhat difficult to actually select certain things and get the toolpath to really cut the way you wanted it to. What you're able to do is right-click on Machine Setup, and with the new options with the feature settings, when you select the geometry here and here, right-click OK. You guys hit Next. You guys can choose ID. Once you choose ID, you go ahead and say, cool, I want to go from the stock material. So watch what happens. I'm going to hit Next, and you have rough and everything. I'm just going to hit Compute so you guys can see this. It now cuts all the way down to where the stock is. So that way, it's removed all the material, even though there's no material, no line here. It'll still cut down to where the data is. Okay? So that's how easy you guys can actually output your inner diameter cuts as well. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at this thing in the simulation really quick so you guys can kind of see. When you guys actually go up to the actual turning job and you guys do launch the software simulator, you actually have your tool holder and your tool. You guys can hit run and actually watch it, cut it out, and you guys can slow it down and speed it up. And there's the grooving, just doing a standard groove, cutting down. Okay, so there's all our roughing pieces, and then there it is coming in. Now, the interesting part is I don't have the tool compensation on with the tool holder comp for the rough cut. So what that did was that wiped out this whole section. So to fix that, just so you guys can see, we should still have material here, here, and here. So to kind of handle that, we can go in here, right? And this is simple as a switch. You guys will go back into the grooving cycle if that's the case, or whatever feature is causing the problem. You'll go to the parameter or the patterns page. You guys will say use tool holder when you guys are checking for collisions. When you hit compute, you'll drastically see the actual toolpath change. So now there's not trying to cut down in here. It's actually following the step going down, okay? And you guys can turn on the tool holder compensation for all your different features so that way it's all handled perfectly, okay? Now, another question we had earlier was, doing threading on a lathe. How we handle threading on a lathe is you actually just need to line the length of your thread. All you guys have to do in that particular case is once that's defined, you guys can go down to your lathe threading option, hit select geometry, and select that line. When you guys select that line, you hit OK, and then what you're going to do in that particular case is you guys are going to define, okay, we're doing, OD or ID, depending on your threading, okay? You're then going to go ahead and choose extensions if you guys want to use the extension portion of it, where it extends the toolpath for you guys. And then you guys have the ability to hit next. You're going to use a lathe thread, and then you can define your threading tool, and again, you can show your tool holder for it and everything like that. And then you guys will go to your parameter settings, and you guys have the threads per inch, thread pitch, first cut amount, last cut amount. Then you have 0 degrees, 29, 30, 50, 55, 57, 60, and 80, depending on your threading, okay? Once you've defined that, you go to your rapids, and then you're going to, again, have your lead-ins, and then you just hit compute. The nice part about it is not having to sit there and try to draw the threads yourself with the geometry. Our software will process the data based on the info we provide for it and the geometry that we do select. So that way you guys don't have to go in and, try to draw the thread with sketching it and everything like that. You guys can just simply output it the way you want to. All right, so now a few other options. When you go down in here to your actual, your lathe turning, let's just say, we want to go ahead and finish this thing. So if we were to go ahead and select the geometry and everything like so for the finishing pass, we can hit OK, and then we can hit next. And it's the same type of setup, except when you get down in here, you guys can just have the finish pass. So I could just say basic finish, no rough pass, hit next, and you guys define the finishing options. And then you guys can define the patterns for it. You have continuous or alternative, where you guys can have it doing alternative style, where it does both vertical faces only, turn diameter only, okay? So you guys can go ahead and go through all those options for that particular case. Now, once you guys have defined all those particular settings the way you guys would like it to be, you guys can actually go ahead, hit next, and once you do that, you guys can hit compute. And what that'll actually do is that'll send your finishing pass, cutting down everything, and you guys can actually see. If I go ahead and blink out all the tool paths, and then just click on the basic finish, you can see the finish pass profiling our shape. Now, what's going to happen is after you guys have defined your specific settings and you've done everything, a couple other neat little features to kind of help you guys. Sometimes when you're profiling or turning something, you guys might have a bunch of features in the tree. That can get overwhelming sometimes, and you might need to make adjustments or settings. If I right-click on Machine Setup, I go down here to Additional Functions, okay? Once I go down here to the actual options for it, I can say Add a Group. What the group does, it allows me to pull certain toolpaths. So I can say, you know what, let's put all the turning options in that folder. We'll go here and lathe turning, okay? Now they're in there. So what that does is that allows you guys, one, to organize everything, and you can give the group whatever name you would like it to be. So for this example, we'll click on it, and we'll just call it turning, okay? Once we've done that, what that allows us to do now is it allows us to organize everything. Right-click on the turning. We can blank them out or post yes, no without having to select each individual toolpath if they're categorized in a group. Okay. The other nice side is you guys are able to. This is another big feature. So what I've been doing with the actual new setup sheets, okay, so you have the grouping option now where you guys are able to actually group the toolpaths together. The best part is you guys can actually go ahead and use your setup sheets, and now the setup sheet takes a photo of whatever's on your screen. So if I wanted to, let's just say I want to get rid of the grid. I just want the setup here. So if I go up here to my preferences, you guys can actually go down here, and the nice part is you guys can show your X and Y, and you can also get rid of that grid if you want to, and the actual beginning point. But we're going to go ahead and leave that on, okay? And then what I've been doing is, because I want, when I take the actual, and I'm going to show you guys, when I right-click here and I go down to Generate Setup Sheet, if it's just a sketch because it's white and it's blue, sometimes the sketch is hard to see, especially if you were to print that. So to remedy that situation, if I'm going to do a setup sheet, I'm going to go ahead myself and go up here to Surfaces. I'm going to go down to the Revolve feature. And this is mainly for if you're doing the setup sheet. If you're not, then this probably isn't going to pertain to you. You guys are able to go ahead and go down here, create the revolve of the solid, hit OK just for a second. So that way when I go here, I have my actual coordinate system here where everything is at. And if I go into my actual CAM option, right click, and I do a generate setup sheet, the software is going to go ahead and take it so I can actually see the piece now. I can see that there's where our coordinate is, and there's our actual model that we're going to be machining. All right, good. So now the other nice part is after you guys have everything done, you guys are able to go ahead, post out that G-code for yourself, right-click and hit post. Okay. Now an interesting thing we did was we combined mill and lathe post together, and that might sound a little weird, but what it did was we actually have the ability now to go ahead, and when you do that, you're actually able to just have one posting file. So what that does for us is when it's a lathe post, we shut off all the milling features in it. But it keeps it so we have one post that can handle both sides, which is really easy for us to modify and make alterations to, as well as it makes it easy for you guys to go in and alter and change as well if you do like to edit your own post. All right. Now, the other side of it is we can actually go ahead now if we want to. We can go in here and actually, let's get rid of, we want to see the threading cycle. Someone's asking to actually see the threading piece. So let's go ahead and do this, and let's show just the threading cycle with the first initial rough so everyone can see that. All right. and that's what's going to show up first is just the thread cycle, okay? And I'm just going to stop it there, okay? And there's your threading cycle on your lathe, just so you guys can actually see. All right, that way you guys can actually see. Obviously, you guys would have all the roughing there and everything, but that way we had a question about showing the simulation of the actual piece. Now, the other nice question we're being asked is, can you pre-enter the program number? Yes, you've always actually been able to enter in the program number. It's actually up here in the turning job. When you go into the current settings, you guys will right-click on turning job, go to current settings, and actually right here under the actual posting page, you have the actual program number. And you can key in your program number there, and that way you guys can go ahead and, I could change it to, 201 or something like that. Now, you hit OK from there, and that is a nice little overview of what's new in our lathe program. So as you guys can see, we did spend a lot of time fixing a lot of different things and going in and adding features that previously weren't there. For those people that are new to BobCAD and never used the old one, obviously, as you can tell, there's a lot of power in just the lathe program as well, okay? Okay, we have a question. On the tool page, how many insert orientations are available? Now, what are you talking about specific? Can you elaborate on the actual orientations available? Are you talking like orientation 1 through 4, 4 through 8? All right, so we're going to go ahead and open it up so that way we can go over the orientations. Because right here on the actual piece you have obviously your shape, okay, diamond, triangle, square, rounded, okay. You guys also have your clearance options here, and then you have the option to go in. You really don't mess with too much of the orientation here. It's more of actually in the feature where you guys can say it's horizontal or vertical based on the actual tool options, and that's where you can also process if the insert is when you guys have the tool holder and everything like that. What's the option for that? How's the insert versus the actual holder? Okay, the shank length, the shank width, you guys can handle for the insert too. Okay. But in the actual feature that he's asking about, when we actually go down in here into the actual feature itself, we go here. You have orientation 1 through 4 for the insert. So there's always 4 orientations for each individual tool. All right. Now, obviously, with version 29 being out, it is our latest version. We have updated a lot of the milling features as well, and like I said, we will be covering that webinar in 2 weeks. Next week we will be at IMTS in Chicago, so that's why we're not going to do it next week. We will do it when we get back. So if you guys are in Chicago, please stop by, say hi. If you want to see some more stuff on the version 29, you can swing by the booth. We'll be doing live demonstrations all day for the whole entire show. There will be about 5 technicians there answering questions and funneling stuff for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and leave the chat open for a little bit. If you guys have more questions about the lathe, I can answer those as well. I do really appreciate you guys taking the time to come check out the version 29 lathe and all the new features for it. If you'd like to see a little bit more of it, you can let us know, and we can set up a private demo maybe on one of your lathe parts or something like that. We're always willing to go ahead and show you guys on your parts so it's more tailored towards you. So again, I really appreciate you guys showing up, and I will talk to you guys later.